The moment James walked into the glass-walled boardroom of Bennett and Cole Enterprises, he already knew he didn't belong there. His shoes were scuffed. His tie was borrowed from his neighbor. His resume had a 6-year gap that no cover letter could adequately explain. But he sat down anyway because his 7-year-old son, Owen, had packed his briefcase that morning with a sticky note that read, "Daddy, you are the bravest man in the whole world." And a man cannot disappoint a sticky note like that. He was applying for a facilities coordinator position, a modest role that paid just enough to keep the lights on and Owen in the second-grade reading program he loved so much. He had applied to 31 jobs in the past 4 months. This was number 32. James had been raising Owen alone since he was 14 months old. His mother, Rachel, had walked away not because she was cruel, but because she was broken in ways she couldn't yet name. Addiction, instability, a life spiraling faster than she could catch herself. James had stood in the doorway of their apartment watching Rachel's car disappear down the street, a toddler on his hip and a silence around him so complete he could hear his own heartbeat. He had not cried that night. He had made Owen a bottle, sung him a song about the moon, and decided without ceremony, without fanfare, that he would be enough. He had to be. The years that followed were not poetic. There was laundry at midnight and school pickups that made him miss overtime shifts. There were birthday cakes baked from YouTube tutorials and haircut lessons he learned from strangers on the internet. He worked 2 jobs for 3 years, a warehouse during the day and a grocery store on weekends, until his back gave out and he had to choose one. He chose the one closer to Owen's school. When he finally sat across from the HR panel that day at Bennett and Cole, he was steady. He was honest. He explained the employment gap with a quiet dignity that he had rehearsed in the mirror a dozen times. "I was a full-time caregiver," he said. "I raised my son. I kept a household running on a very limited income. I learned more about problem-solving, prioritization, and resilience in those years than I could have anywhere else." The HR team exchanged glances. The interview ended politely. James walked out and told himself he had done his best. What he did not know, what he could not have known, was that behind the mirrored glass partition in that building, a man named Charles Bennett had been watching. Charles Bennett was the CEO of the firm. He was 61 years old, immaculately dressed, and famous in the industry for being precise, unemotional, and unreachable. He had a reputation for decisions made purely on data. He had not attended an entry-level interview in more than 20 years. He had only walked past the glass partition that day by coincidence, or perhaps by something else entirely. He had stopped walking the moment he saw Owen's photograph fall from James's briefcase mid-interview. James had quietly picked it up and placed it back without drawing attention to it, but not before Charles had seen the little boy's face clearly through the glass. That evening, Charles sat in his office long after the building had emptied. His assistant found him there, still and quiet, staring at a framed photograph on his own desk. A photograph of a young man who had once been his son before the estrangement, before the years of silence, before everything fell apart. The young man in his photograph had the same wide eyes, the same particular tilt of the chin, the same expression of concentrated thought as the little boy in James's photo. The resemblance was not supernatural. It was not a miracle. It was simply one of those moments where the universe places a mirror in front of you and dares you to look away. His assistant asked if everything was all right. Charles asked her to pull James's application back from the rejection pile. The next morning, James received a phone call asking him to come back in, not for the facilities coordinator position, but for a meeting with the CEO directly. He almost didn't go. He thought it was a mistake. He brought Owen to his neighbor's apartment, straightened his borrowed tie, and went. Charles Bennett shook James's hand, closed the door, and asked him to sit. Then he did something no one in that building had ever seen him do. He placed James's application on the table between them and said, in a voice quieter than his reputation, "Tell me about him. Not about the job, not about the qualifications. About Owen." And James, who had spent 6 years carrying everything alone, who had learned to answer hard questions without flinching, felt something loosen in his chest. He talked about Owen the way a man talks about the one thing he has done completely and unreservedly right. He talked about his laugh, about the way he narrated his own dreams every morning over cereal, about how he had made him a card last Father's Day that said, "You are my dad and also my best friend and also my favorite chef, even though you only make pasta." He talked about the fear, the constant low-grade fear of not being enough, of the gap between what Owen deserved and what he could give. He talked about it plainly, without self-pity, the way exhausted, devoted parents do when someone finally asks. Charles listened without interruption. When James finished, there was a long silence. Then Charles said something that James would repeat for the rest of his life, at dinner tables, in quiet moments, and eventually at Owen's graduation. He said, "I had a son once. I was too busy building all of this," and here he gestured at the glass and steel around them, "to build what actually mattered. He's gone now. Not gone. just gone from me, and I would trade every floor of this building to sit across from him the way you just talked about yours. He offered James a position that day, not as a facilities coordinator, but as part of a new community outreach program the company had quietly been developing. A role that came with regular hours, benefits, and a salary that would finally let James breathe. He said he didn't fully understand why he was doing it. He said it felt like something he owed the universe. James drove to pick up Owen that afternoon with the windows down and the radio up. He carried him on his back all the way up the apartment stairs. Owen asked why he was so happy. James told him that sometimes people surprise you, that sometimes kindness shows up in the last place you expected, delivered by the last person you imagined, that the world is harder than it should be, but never, not once, completely without grace. Owen thought about this for a moment. Then he asked if they were having pasta for dinner. They were. If this story moved you, hit that like button. It helps us reach more people who need a reminder that kindness still exists. Subscribe to the channel so you never miss a story like this one, and drop a comment below. Have you ever had a moment where a total stranger changed the course of your life? We'd love to hear it.